Penguin Random House Audio presents Story of a Murder, The Wives, the Mistress, and Dr. Crippen by Hallie Rubenhold. Read for you by Juliet Stevenson.
Prologue. No murderer should ever be the guardian of their victim's story, and yet this is the role that Hawley Harvey Crippen has always held. For weeks in 1910, he stood sphinx-like and imperturbable under the public gaze. The police and the press marvelled at his fixed expression, at how it remained unyielding to questioning and cross-examination. Not even the sudden bursts of photographers' flashes rattled him. He never flinched or buckled under the pressure. He gave one account of events from which he never deviated. So long as he held that narrative close, he also controlled Belle Elmore's story, all the elements of her tale, all the experiences and opinions of the wife he had killed. Although he was recognized as a proven liar, his version of the ordeal, his assertions about her, would be what endured. The events of the North London cellar murder would be remembered as Dr. Crippen's tale, a sensationalized story of a murderer. Until relatively recently, murderers' tales would jump directly from the newspapers into cultural legend. Once they were ballads with block-printed portraits, then penny dreadfuls and cheap paperbacks stuffed full of chilling exploits. Long ago, murderers became celebrity monsters, terrifying aberrations of humanity whose waxwork likenesses inspired an uneasy mix of revulsion and reverence among those who visited chambers of horrors. Like most myths, stories of murderers and their crimes made for great entertainment. The veracity of these often repeated narratives, whether sung or whispered around campfires, was rarely probed. When a killer is placed at the centre of the drama, there is no opportunity to contemplate anything else. They own the story entirely. Their deeds are of prime importance. Everyone else is just a supporting character. This book pulls apart the traditional framework of the North London cellar murder and removes Hawley Harvey Crippen from his usual role as the story's star. He will be one character among an ensemble cast brought together to tell a more panoramic and human version of one of the most infamous crimes of the early 20th century. This is the story of a murder, not a murderer, and as such there is space for nuance, for moral ambiguity, for understanding the context of the crime, the lives of those it touched, and the setting in which it occurred. Room has been created to consider the perceptions and contributions of a range of individuals who were previously dismissed as peripheral. Since 1910, the wardens of Dr. Crippen's story have been a corps of male narrators. Chief Inspector Walter Dew, Captain Henry Kendall, the barristers Richard Muir, F.E. Smith, Travers Humphreys, Cecil Mercer and Samuel Ingleby Oddie, and the scientists William Wilcox and Bernard Spilsbury, along with a collection of music hall performers and journalists, have each, in their own way, propped up Crippen's story with their memoirs and biographies. Bound into these volumes are the tales of masterful, clever and brave men whose shrewd observations, expertise or decisive action enabled them to help capture a killer and bring him to justice. These men could not be heroes if Hawley Crippen were not a villain. Standing behind them is another group whose contributions have been allowed to fade away with the passage of time. The North London cellar murder is a story predominantly about women, but told almost exclusively by men. So many of its female players were vocal and active participants in events. Aside from Belle Elmore and the femme fatale, Ethel Leneve, whose stories are woven into the case, an entire company of women, sisters, friends and colleagues, all occupied roles of varying importance in the discovery and prosecution of the crime. Some of them were even involved in changing the law. While Ethel Leneve's story was extensively chronicled by the press, only Adeline Harrison, a journalist, was given significant space in the papers to air her views. Unlike her male counterparts, the secretary of the Music Hall Ladies' Guild, Melinda May, was the sole woman to have her first-hand account published in a book. It is the women's version of events, what they saw and did, as documented in newspapers and archival records, that I will be fully restoring to this history. Murders are horrific events, devastating, squalid, and vicious. There is nothing that can mitigate the destructive impact of a life deliberately extinguished. However, what such a crime does leave in its wake is an opportunity to pause and to examine the human condition. On its most basic level, a murder is a story about people and their emotions, about their vehement desires, their tumultuous anger, their raging jealousy, their corrosive frustrations. It is about what these forces wreak on families, friends, communities, and societies. In some cases, it is about the imprint these events leave on history. It was through this lens that I came, almost by accident, to the subject of murder. As a social historian, my interests lie in the mundane and unspoken aspects of daily human existence, the grubby and unmentionable, the inner dialogues, the fears, the shame, and the expectations harboured by the long dead, who, like us, yearned and ached and loved. While the wealthy and educated often recorded their experiences, the majority of men and women who inhabited centuries past were not granted this privilege. Instead, traces of their life journeys can frequently be found in the documentation of crime. As any member of the modern police force or the criminal justice system will attest, a murder creates an enormous amount of paperwork. It was no different in the past. Where the historian is concerned, these forms and statements, the interviews with witnesses, the inventories of confiscated property, and even the newspaper reports are like gold dust. A crime creates a fixed snapshot of an era, at a particular moment in a particular place. It also presents an opportunity to take a core sample of that society. The documentation surrounding a crime allows historians to drill into a period and to examine the realities of life that lurk beneath the publicly espoused values and beliefs. How people claim to have lived and how they actually lived rarely ever aligns. Truth is a slippery substance. No account, even one written into historical record, is ever entirely reliable. Everyone will see or experience an event differently from someone else, which is not to suggest one or the other is incorrect, but rather that history offers us an ever-shifting kaleidoscope of possible answers. In the context of a historical crime, the personal motives of those providing the accounts must also be considered. Not everyone is forthcoming with information, and sometimes that which is offered is presented in fragments. Everyone involved in the North London cellar murder harboured their own set of imperatives. Some wanted justice for their friend or family member. Others wished to protect the defendant or themselves from punishment or public censure. The police wanted to demonstrate that they were diligent. Reporters wanted to produce good copy and smoothed and trimmed their interviews accordingly. Occasionally, they coloured the dull spots with their imagination. All these participants and their array of accounts contribute to the multi-act drama you are about to experience. But be warned, this ensemble cast is comprised of many unreliable narrators. If, at times, certain stories seem inconsistent, It is because they are formed of stratified lies.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?